At the time of the massacre, the mine was owned by Lonmin, but in 2019, the company was bought by Sibanye-Stillwater. 10 years on, they are still living with the legacy of that day. For more on this, I'm joined now by the Executive Vice President of Stakeholder Relations at Sibanye-Stillwater, Thabisile Phumo, who speaks to us from Marikana today. Ms. Phumo, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with what has been done by Sibanye-Stillwater since the events of August 2012 in order to uplift not just the workers but the community at large.
Good day to you, Toli, and to your viewers. Thank you for the opportunity. So when we arrived in Marikana in 2019, June, one of the first things we did was to engage with the affected, largely the families and the children, to just get a sense as to what were the outstanding issues, because you will remember that when the tragedy happened, Sibanye was not even formed yet as a company. Out of that process, we've been able to work on a few programs, including education for the children, which is something we are continuing with. We've also ensured the continued employment of the widows and some of the family members. But we're also in the process of finalizing the construction of houses that were left off from the process that AMCU started off. What is significant with the work that we have done because of the engagement with the families, we also went to meet the family structures in the Eastern Cape in Lesotho, is that they've now set up a task team which is going to help drive the issues they believe are pertinent to their healing as well as closure. Yeah. Now, in terms of the social issues, because you would remember that Lonmin had left a legacy of some of incomplete projects from their social and labor plans. Again, we engaged with the local leaders. We have a community engagement forum that comprises traditional leaders, ward councillors, as well as the local municipality, and we fast-tracked the delivery of social projects such as clinics in the area. We've delivered 2, we are building 1 right now. We've delivered schools, we've delivered road infrastructure. We recognize that there's still a long way to go. Yeah. But I think as a company, together with the stakeholders that we are working with, we are well on our way in ameliorating the living conditions of the communities in and around our operations, as well as the conditions of our employees.
In order to perhaps have a fulsome picture of what you have done, Ms. Phumo, as a company, I suspect we are going to have to do lots more visits to Marikana. But as a starting point, you have penned a very interesting article where you say that in order to honor the past, we've got to remember those who died at Marikana in 2012. Now, the question here is whether those engagements, as you've stated, have been fruitful with the people that were affected directly. And I ask you this because the erection of the remembrance wall is not where the families want for it to be. Why did the company choose to build it somewhere in a security compound, as one of the people reflected for us a few days ago, and not at the copy?
Thank you so much for that question, because there's a lot of confusion around it. So in the meeting that took place with the families in May, the plans for the memorial at the copy were discussed. The task team led by the families are currently working with the technical teams to make sure that that project at the copy continues. You will remember there was an outstanding step of getting permission from the landowners, which we've since received, such that as soon as the families are able to sign off the designs, and all the 44 families have actually agreed to be represented at the copy, that project will commence. The genesis of the memorial wall is actually on the basis that when we arrived at Marikana, some of the widows, because they were the first stakeholders we met, were saying there is no sign that the company, then Lonmin, had recognized the 44 victims. we have done is what we do normally across all our operations, where when people die as a result of a fatality, we have what we call a wall of remembrance. So what you see at the entrance, and very prominent at the entrance of our building, is what we call a wall of remembrance. It's not an unusual process, but we've placed it there so that anybody who arrives in Marikana can know that as a company we acknowledge the pain, but we also acknowledge the fact that 44 of our colleagues perished in Marikana. So I'm hopeful that the task team led by the families will conclude the process of the plans, and we should see the construction of the memorial at the Kopi taking place maybe later this year, depending on where they arrive. Because what has been critical in the conversation has been the families, even the children, saying, please include us in the processes that are going to affect us. That is why they are key in leading the conversation on the construction of the memorial at the Kopi.
That's a very, very important development and clarity. So you're saying that you've received permission from the landowners in order for you to build some kind of a monument there, and that will likely start sometime this year. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, depending obviously on where the families land with what the design looks like. Because in May, in principle, they accepted the concept, but they're now in a task team that's actually working on what the actual design should look like, how the deceased should be represented. So together with the technical teams that will see this project into fruition, we are hopeful that they will come to some agreement in terms of what it should look like, because Sibanye has committed to funding its construction.
Perfect. Ms. Phumo, I have to let you go. Very briefly, less than a minute. Are you willing to apologize to those who were affected by this tragedy? Because the understanding is that the company has not apologized.
Look, as a company that arrived in 2019, we have acknowledged the pain of the families. But I think it is important that there is understanding where the families are asking the apology from. And in terms of the discussions and how they have actually ventilated this conversation, they've been very clear who they want an apology from. And I think we need to, as they have said before, listen to what the families are asking for. And in this case, it's an apology from an authority that they believe was involved in this issue many years ago, long before we arrived.
Thabisile Phumo speaks for Sibanye-Stillwater. Thank you very much for your time.